Thank you.
So good to be back.
It's so good to have you back. Perfect song for tonight as well. Even a small star shines in the darkness. That's one of the things that we talk about a lot here in Unity, is that there is a spark of divinity in all of us. We're each of us here to reveal some unique expression of God's own nature, God's own qualities: light, love, power, peace, beauty, joy. You're here to bring that to earth. Some of you didn't know you signed up for that, did you? But you did. That's why you're here. We've been talking about change a lot. I wonder why. I noticed that this is our third Wednesday night in a row where we've been talking about change. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke about moving with the flow. Last week, Reverend Jean Marie brought a wonderful message on embracing change. And this week, I'm talking about the power to change. And a couple of weeks ago, I talked about, we've been talking about how change is inevitable, but sometimes we resist. And one of the things I mentioned was that aging is one of the things that some people, they want to resist that very natural and interesting change, all the changes. So I found a couple of stories I want to share with you. These are from the internet. They must be true. This woman writes, "My grandson was visiting me one day, and he asked, 'Grandma, do you know how you and God are alike?' She said, 'I mentally polished my halo while I asked, 'No, how are we alike?' 'You're both old,' he replied." A grandmother was telling her little granddaughter what her own childhood was like. "We used to skate outside on a pond. We had a swing made from a tire. It hung from a tree in the front yard. We rode our pony. We picked wild raspberries in the woods." Her granddaughter looked at her wide-eyed and she said, "I sure wish I'd known you sooner." And this is my favorite. An elderly woman and her little grandson, whose face was sprinkled with a lot of bright freckles. They spent the day at the zoo, and lots of children were getting in line to get their cheeks painted by a face painter. And they were doing tigers. And then the artist said, "You've got so many freckles here, there's no place to paint." And then the little boy was a little embarrassed, and he dropped his head, but his grandmother knelt down beside him, and she said, "I love your freckles. When I was a little girl, I always wanted freckles." She said, "Freckles are beautiful," as she touched his cheeks. And he looked up and he says, "Really?" "Of course," said his grandmother. "Why, just name me one thing that's prettier than freckles." And the little boy thought for a moment. He looked up at his grandmother and he smiled and he said, "Wrinkles." Isn't that great? Embracing the change, that change comes. And I love what Jean Marie said last week. It's going to happen, and we're going to tell a story about it. And we can tell the story of victim and woe is me, or we can tell the story of empowerment. So that's what we've really been talking about. Change is coming. Let's get ourselves unanchored from our perception and our idea of what we think it's supposed to look like, moving with the flow of life, and tell the story that it's good, and tell the story that God is moving through us and to us and for us, and it's all going to work out great. Amen? Amen. So that's the last 2 weeks. That's not what I'm talking about tonight. Tonight I'm talking about the power to change. Let me hear you say, power to change. Power to change. Ooh, I think you got it. So I'm not talking about those changes that come unexpected and maybe sometimes unwelcome, but I'm talking about when we want to change. When there is something that we want to see different in our experience of life. Anybody up for that?
Yes.
How do we create the change we want to see in our own very lives? I remember a few years ago, do you remember Dr. Laura? Is she still around? I don't know. But when she first came on the radio, I was just fascinated because she really just told people where to go. It was kind of interesting, and I really enjoyed her kind of brash talk. Now it's everywhere. Everybody does that. But I remember somebody had called her, and it was a girl who was just wanting, "Oh, he'll change," about her boyfriend. "He'll change for me. I know he will." And, Dr. Laura would say, "Honey, no." And then the woman asked her, she said, "Well, does anybody ever change?" And I remember Dr. Laura's answer. Even though it wasn't based in Unity teachings, I remember it. She said, "Very rarely do people change, and only after a lot of time and effort." And I remember thinking that's pretty depressing. But then I kind of scanned my family and my friends, And I think it's kind of factual. There aren't that many people who really change in a positive, intentional way. And then, I was already on my recovery story and path, and so I'm one of the lucky ones who has changed completely. I mean, not completely. I'm not done, believe me, by any stretch. But I was talking to a young woman today, and I was talking about if my 51-year-old self could go back to my 28-year-old self and say, this is the life ahead of you, I wouldn't have believed it. And so what I was thinking about, if we're going to be intentional and create the change in our own lives that we want, if we want to change, I think that Dr. Laura was kind of onto it. Doesn't happen that often for most people. It takes a long time, usually. Doesn't have to, usually does. Takes some sustained effort. And the thing that I think that worked for me is you need spiritual power. When Carl Jung had tried to work with alcoholics, this is before the founding of any modern-day recovery movement, he found this to be true, that even though he was a brilliant psychiatrist and he would work with these men and women, but the ones who were able to achieve lasting sobriety were the ones who had what he called a spiritual transformation. Something had to shift in the entire persona on a spiritual plane for change to occur. You are very fortunate because you are in a community that knows that ain't no big thing. The spiritual power to change is yours. It's already here. It's already within you. So whatever it is that you want to change into, to become, you're going to need some power, and you've already got it. Jean Marie did a wonderful 2-part series back in June on Discover the Power Within You, a wonderful book by Eric Butterworth, a Unity minister and author. That idea is so central to our teaching. In other religions, they practice a worldview called dualism, that there is a spiritual reality somewhere and there is an earthly reality and they're separate, and there's got to be some sort of magical path to get the spiritual reality to earthly reality. And so different religions and spiritual practices have different ways of understanding that. Unity is not dualistic. We are what is called idealistic in our worldview, and that we believe there's only one reality. It is spiritual. And so there is no separation in our physical, everyday existence from the spiritual reality. God's power is in every atom, in every cell, in every organ, in every system, in every tissue in your body. It's already here. God's power is already here. And so this power, I talked about it sometimes like, we use the word co-create a lot, right? Like I am co-creating my life with my thoughts, with my beliefs, all the time with Spirit. And that's great. But sometimes that word co-create puts a little bit more responsibility on me than I care to take on. Like I've got to generate some power. I don't. The power of God. God is like the creation engine, and you, in your individualized self, you don't have to make the power. It's already here. All you have to do is welcome it and direct it. And so what I have been working with this idea of directing infinite spiritual potential into my life. That's my job, is to direct it in intentional, purposeful, meaningful, good ways. Who wants some of that? Amen. All right. So now that we know that, let's just go do it, right? Let's just go create the life we want. Let's create the world we want. Done, right? All right. We finally figured that out. Woo! It's not as easy as it sounds, is it? It's simple. The idea that we are creating all the time, that the creative energy of God is moving through us, moving through the filters, through the lenses of our thoughts and beliefs about the world. And, that's the problem right there. Did I mention that? The creative power of God moves through our beliefs, moves through our thoughts. You been stuck in traffic in Houston lately? Jenny got it probably today. Yeah. You've been... Catch your thinking in one of those moments, particularly if you're late. What's your thinking then? Are you thinking, I'm creating the wonderful universe around me, I'm just wonderful? Probably not. Okay, what about when your mother criticizes you and you thought you did exactly what she wanted and she still found the reason to, okay, are you thinking wonderful, creative, life-affirming thoughts? I can give you, these are just some of my examples, but you get the idea that there are so many times in life that we are thinking from a less than holy place. We're thinking from a place of lack and resistance, a place of separation and pain. And so we're creating with Spirit, moving through us all the time, but not always in the way we want. And so our work, people say, why do y'all talk about the work? You all have to do all this work. Shouldn't it just be like easy? Well, it's simple, but not always easy. There is work to be done. As I mentioned, I was sitting with a young woman today and just reflecting. My heart was so full. In AA, sometimes I hear the old-timers talk about, they want to talk about their old drinking days because it keeps the memory of it green. So I was sharing some of my early past with her and how hard my 20s were, and it was making it green for me again. And I was remembering how, boy, that 27, 28-year-old would never have known how to get where I am today. But it took time. It took time, and it took work. The work was, well, I'll tell you what the work is. It's healing your belief system, your BS. Yeah, that's what it is. The work is to heal your belief system, is to get rid of the old BS, your belief system, and align your thinking, your heart, your mind, your soul with the truth of your being, that you are the light of the world. So for me, there have been 3 main paths. 12-step recovery, I've talked about that quite a bit, and those steps are in order, and they're, whatever your addiction is, we got a program for you. It's really great. I believe in 12-step recovery. You may not. You may have had a different experience of it. For me, it was profoundly impactful and helpful. The second was New Thought teaching. I was found in a bar singing, I know, big surprise, when I was 28 years old, singing in a little piano bar in Dallas, Texas. Many of you know the story, some of you may not, but I was minding my own business and my cocktails and singing my little show tunes, and then this guy comes into the bar. I thought he was going to ask me out on a date, and he asked me to come sing at his church. And I thought, what kind of a minister, do you know where you are? What kind of a church has their minister go to a gay piano bar to try and find somebody to come sing at their church? I thought, maybe I found my church. That was how many years ago? 25 years ago. Is that right? Yeah. And I showed up because they paid me $75 to sing a couple of those show tunes. The check cashed. And I began my journey in New Thought teachings. I didn't believe it when that minister told me that there was no separation between me and God. I didn't. Because I'd grown up in a way that my sin had separated me from God. I could never come back to God in the way that I felt like God needed me to. And to be told that the Spirit of God was alive and active and creative within me was new. It didn't feel like the truth. And you may be sitting there tonight thinking, that sounds like magic. That's not true. But I kept coming back, probably because the checks kept cashing. But, what God will use whatever God needs to get what God needs. And after a while, I noticed that the minister and the teachers, they weren't yelling at me and telling me I was horrible. They were actually giving me all this really affirmative, beautiful, uplifting messages about who I was. And I began to try it. Took a class. Learned about affirmations. Learned about affirmative prayer. I learned about my BS, my belief system. I began to actively work to release old limiting ideas that kept me in my victimhood. Do people change? Yes. And it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes spiritual power. So wherever you are on your spiritual journey, if you are in a place of deep pain and hopelessness, I'm telling you that change is possible for you. And all that you need is here. And you may be the one that just has your belief system completely transformed overnight and you wake up and it's all differently. But most of us, we take the journey one step at a time. Somebody told me, and actually many people told me in ministerial school, it was a thing, we kind of got to be a joke. Don't overestimate what you can do in your first year of ministry, and don't underestimate what you can do in your first 10. I don't think there's anything magical about those numbers, but it begins to give you some space. What God can do if you give God some time. You apply your willingness to God's time and see your life transformed. Job 22, verse 28. You shall also decree a thing, and it will be established for you. So light will shine on all your ways. You shall decree the change you wish to see in your life, and God's light will shine upon it, upon your path. That's what we promise you. So, richer living. There's a wonderful book called 365 Days of Richer Living. It's by Ernest Holmes and Raymond Charles Barker. It's one of those daily spiritual guides written in the 1950s. And I have, my physical copy is just in tatters. I've used it so many times, highlighted and underlined, and I now have it on Kindle. And I read it almost every year. I may let it go for a couple of years and do other things and come back to it. And every time I come back to it, it's like, oh my gosh. But it's all affirmation. Just wonderful new thought principles in affirmation form. And a couple of days ago, I was preparing for this message, and it was the 12th. Was that Monday? Whenever that was. Saturday. And I was thinking about this idea of evil. That there's idea that there is some force against us in the world. And this is what Ernest Holmes and Raymond Charles write about that. And again, this is all in the first person affirmation. I know that no evil can happen to me unless it happens through me. And that I will not allow. I consecrate my consciousness to truth, and thereby think the truth and experience the truth. Evil is not the truth, and has no place in me, nor in my affairs. The endless possibilities of life are before me, and nothing can prevent my spiritual development. I know that I am growing in spiritual wisdom and in factual demonstration. Demonstration means manifestation. I know that I am growing in spiritual wisdom and in factual demonstration. Every victory over evil increases my realization of its lack of power and authority in my life. I am the victorious creation of triumph in all my ways. I don't know what your evil is. I don't know what the circumstances that you think in your life are keeping you from your good, but they're not. The only evil you can experience is that which comes through you. It is those beliefs that somebody's against you. It is the belief that you don't have what it takes to create your life. That is the evil. And the moment that we begin to release our belief in that idea and step into the field of possibilities is where life can get real fun and real interesting and where change occurs. So there is a long, long history of a conversation in unity. Do we have any business saying stuff about what's going on in the world or not? Here's why we have this conversation. Our teaching is internally focused. A couple of weeks ago, I was sharing with you, I've been really digging deep into the Sermon on the Mount. And this theme really has been prevalent for me about what Jesus was showing us, is don't look to the outside world for your good. Always look within. He said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Don't store up treasures on earth where moth and rust will destroy, but put your treasure in heaven. Where your heart is, there your treasure will be. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. There are so many of his parables and stories that are telling us that it's an inside job. It's not going on out there. And so on Saturday, with what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, I was deeply troubled. And I thought, do I have anything to say about this from a unity perspective? And as I said, this conversation has been going on a long time. And you may think that I don't have anything to say about this, that I should just keep my focus on my own life and shut up. So I had two choices. It's kind of like Goldilocks and the three porridges. You know, one's too hot, one's too cold, and one is just right. I'm going for the just right. I hope you'll stay with me. I could just bury my head in the sand and not say anything. Or I could get on a soapbox and be all fiery and tell you all the evils of men and what ought to happen. Or I could find the way to hold up a spiritual truth for us tonight. So if your heart is open to that, that's my intention, is to hold up a spiritual truth for us around what is happening in our country. And that's what I hope to do to end our talk tonight. Thank you. Like individuals, cultures hold belief systems. And what did I just say? What keeps us from the power to change into the life we want? It's our belief systems, our false beliefs. And our culture has beliefs, and some of them are false. Racism is a false belief. The idea that one person is in any way superior to another or inferior because of the color of their skin, this is false. And if I didn't say that to you, I feel like I would be doing a disservice to you, and I would be not true to the passion of my own heart. But here's what I want to show. Here's the light I want to hold up to us. Just like it's hard for people to change, and it takes time and it takes spiritual power, it's the same for nations. But what if we could heal the false belief of racism in our lifetime? Amen. This is not about blame. It's not about how many sides there are. It's about finding the super goal, the thing that is above and beyond who did what to whom. It is about finding the truth. And here's where I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to be on either of the cold or the hot porridge. I'm going to find this middle place, and it has to be a spiritual principle. And what is the spiritual principle that would support the idea of healing racism? And you know what it is? It is our core belief. I ask you this question a lot. What's our name, church? Unity. There you go. We believe in oneness. There is one power, one life, one source of all good, all being, and it expresses itself perfectly everywhere. It is laughable, it is ridiculous to think that some people are different than other people based upon the color of their skin. It cannot be. We are here to bring the spiritual principles into the world. So here's where I was going. Well, Jesus was always saying it's not about the world. It's not about what the governments are doing. It's about the inside. But he also said in the Sermon on the Mount, one of my favorite scriptures, Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world. Yeah, you know your Bible. You are the light of the world. And a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. What does that mean for us? It means that when we seek first God's kingdom within us, when we begin to live our lives in spiritual principles, when we heal our own false beliefs, we shine. Yes. And you cannot shine if you are a racist in that way. That is a false belief. And our country, our nation cannot shine the light of God, the kingdom of heaven, until we heal this old idea. So we do have a role in the world. There's something for us to do. And what is it? It's to be light. It's to be truth. It's not to be against. We had a wonderful two-part dialogue on race here, and part of our Healing the Heart of America series. And I remember one of the older African-American gentlemen in the crowd, he had this amazing, he had a long history in the civil rights movement, and he had this awakening. He was talking to a younger African-American woman in her 20s, and she said, I don't want to march against anything. She said, but I want to march for peace, equality, justice, and oneness. And he said it was like this new idea, this bigger idea occurred to him that maybe that's the way we do this. It's not marching against anybody or against old ideas. It is about marching for. It is about standing for. It is about preaching for peace, justice, unity, oneness. So that's what we're about. That all sounds great. You go do that, preacher. Tell me how that goes. You think that's where I'm going to leave it? No! So this morning as I was doing my meditation and my journaling, and I was like, what's mine to do? This is the question I come to over and over again. Not what do I want to do, not what is my ego telling me I should do. What is mine to do? The path of my soul. What is my calling? What is the thing that I am to do? And here's this thing, my heart is troubled. My mom and I talked and seeing some things differently around this, but what I kept saying was that the language she would use in her little Pentecostal church is, I feel a burden to pray. And that has been mine to do. And the way we pray in unity is not to ask God to give us something we don't have, but it's that the truth be revealed. Where can I see truth here? And so what else is mine to do? Well, I could have shut up tonight, but I knew that that wasn't mine to do. Mine to do was to say what's real for me, what's true for me, grounded in spiritual principles. So now the question is, what is yours to do? And I don't know. I don't know. But you do. Your belief systems may be in the way. You may not be able to hear what is yours to do right now. But if you get quiet and you ask that question, something will tell you. When your racist uncle tells a joke at the family gathering, say something, if that's yours to do. Amen. Stand up for your beliefs and yourself, if that is yours to do. We are doing another two-part series. Stephanie and Jean are going to lead us on how to become an ally, I believe, is what we're doing. Yeah, so it's many of us who are non-racist white folks, we don't quite know what to do to help, but we want to. And so in our church, we're going to give you a tool. We're going to give you an opportunity to come together with some people who have studied and who know. I encourage you to come to those. Do you know those dates, Stephanie, roundabout? Okay, get them to me. I want people to mark it on their calendar tonight. I think it's going to be really important. There is something for us to do. And here's why we're going to do it. Because when we heal whatever our part of the big healing is, it inspires change everywhere. Everywhere. It inspires people to get healed from their addictions. It inspires people to get healed from their old, limiting, crippling belief in unworthiness. There's this thing that I've discovered. Have you ever had so many problems you just don't know where to start? Is that just me? It's like, imagine, coming into a really messy room and it's like, it's just too much. I can't do it. Yeah, you get overwhelmed. And that's how you can be when you're looking at the problems of the world. But when you focus on spiritual solution and you ask the question, what is mine to do? You'll get a clue as to which dirty sock to pick up first. Yeah. And you start there. Start right where you are. Where am I? I'm at Unity of Houston. This seems like a really good place to start changing the world, does it not? I love you. God bless you.